Hello, Paul Giamatti speaking.
And I'm Stephen Aswell. I never come in right.
I didn't know.
honestly,
Yeah, I know. It's really interesting. There's always a moment of incredible suspense when I'm like, what's going to happen?
Because I look at you and I think, like, is he going to continue a riff of some kind, or is he just waiting for me to step in?
It's amazing. There's a moment of real suspense there. It's like heart-stopping suspense. It's
I like to build attention for the channel.
Oh, my God. It's the most exciting part of my week. I'm just like, is Steve going to say anything? Holy shit, what's going to happen? Is the whole thing going to go off the rails? Is that going to be it? Is it just going to be me saying I'm Paul Giamatti and that's it? Holy fuck.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Good night. Oh, my God. Here we are. We're back again, Steve. Back on the rails. Back setting sail once again into the uncharted waters of the chinwag.
This is truly, we're looking at material today that really is on the edge of the known and the sort of elite investigators of the unknown.
It's true. That's really true. These guys are they're the point men. These are the guys. They're the elite.
The Forteans.
The Forteans. And this
I think
is kind of like
they're so like hardcore that they remain under the radar for a lot of people. Like a lot of people are into sort of woo-woo, paranormal, supernatural, but these guys are really kind of not. They never really like blew up. Is it fair to say?
I think that's an interesting thing to say. I also think that I would go so far as to say, fancying that I am sort of one of these people, although I'm here shooting my mouth off when I'm about to say maybe I'm disproving it, but I think they prefer it that way.
Yes,
I think
agree.
they somewhat prefer to not be. I think they prefer to go, okay, there you are over there, you're the skeptic. There you are over there, you're the completely credulous one. We're just going to watch you people fumble around.
Fight it out.
We're going to watch you people fumble around and try and explain this stuff. And we're just going to sit back and enjoy the weirdness. Just let the weirdness wash over. Just take a bath in weirdness and just enjoy that. I mean, there's something to it.
They're a community. They are a community, but they're like an indie band that doesn't want to have a hit, basically. They want to stay.
I think a little bit. I think there's something to that. I do. And that's an interesting thing, wanting to stay sort of out of the fray, maybe stay a little bit marginal, because that's actually a better vantage point or something.
I think so. Right? That's how it feels to me, too.
That's super interesting. Oh boy! Well, as I promised at some point, this is indeed a second episode with Mr. Ian Simmons, the font of weird wisdom from the Fortean Times news desk. And as promised, here it is, your second episode of Intense Weirdness.
Enjoy.
Manja. What is the sort of Fortean take of the kind of conspiracy culture now? And I mean, is it, it's this crazy. I was always sort of fascinated by the conspiracy. We didn't go to the moon. We didn't do, and these were kind of fun conspiracies.
Yes.
But conspiracies taken on
fun.
Right? Yeah. It used to be kind of fun. And it was like, and then it became this terribly menacing thing. And then it was reviving all these kind of old anti-Semitic things and, and it takes on all of that kind of stuff. What's the sort of attitude toward conspiracy from a Fortean point of view?
A kind of exasperated frustration, I think, in that, it used to be a kind of left-wing-ish libertarian stuff that, Robert Anton Wilson and Illuminatus and Operation Mindfuck and all that kind of thing, where it was very much trickster spirit jokery. And I mean, I know people like Bill Drummond from the KLF and all that kind of stuff.
What's that? What's the Bill Drummond and the KLF stuff?
But it's another Ken Campbell thing. Ken Campbell did Illuminatus, which was an 8-hour play based on Robert Anton Wilson's books that, among other things, included Robert turning up for a couple of performances and having sex naked with a golden apple on stage at the National Theatre here.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
The set designer for that was a geezer called Bill Drummond, who kind of did it all. And then one day Bill sent it, Ken Campbell, who was directing this thing, sent Bill out for some araldite glue, and Bill never came back. He just kept walking. Along the way, he formed a band called Big in Japan. With a lot of people who went on to be in things like Frankie Goes to Hollywood and things like that. Yeah, became the manager of late 70s Liverpool bands Echo and the Bunnymen and Teardrop Explode. Teardrop Explode included Ian Cope, who went on to write the definitive books about stone circles and to be awesome in his own right. But him and Bill's fallout. Bill goes off on sort of some strange perambulation for a while. There was a whole bunch with Echo and the Bunnymen and stuff about giant rabbits, and I regularly send Bill giant rabbit stories still. And so he forms a rave band with a guy called Jimmy Corty, who in the 70s painted that Tolkien poster. You will know it if you see it. It was the ubiquitous Gandalf poster in student beds.
I know exactly what it is.
Yeah. And they formed this rave band. Well, they actually don't. Not initially. They form a sort of comedy band called the Time Lords, who make a Doctor Who themed hit single. And then they write a book about how anybody can make a hit single.
It's an amazing story.
Amazing.
This then mutates, and they form the KLF, the Copyright Liberation Front, to do stuff with, among other people, make a rave song with Tammy Wynette about the Illuminati, which is a big international hit, and they did several other ones as well.
I'm not sure. Did you start like inventing this halfway through the story?
No. I mean, I
believe you. I'm just teasing.
I'm just editing Tom's out.
No, but your point being that it's like this was the kind of fun conspiratorial sort of creation.
So
all machines creating this stuff. Yeah.
Bill goes on to be the KLF go on to be the biggest selling singles band in the world in 1991. They at a big awards ceremony, a music awards ceremony, they perform a version with extreme metal band Extreme Noise Terror, machine gun the audience with a replica machine gun. Bill is prevented from cutting his own hand off and throwing it at the audience, but they do dump a dead sheep outside with the KLF died for you painted on its side, and then they go on to burn £1 million they've earned from this on camera in Scotland. They literally burned £1 million.
Fantastic.
They're now running. They've then gone on to organise a funeral pyramid, and if you can have your remains burnt into a brick and built into a pyramid in Liverpool. I've got my brick back there.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
And
fantastic.
Yes, they are incredible. The whole, the whole story. But yes, right. So that kind of was a trickster version.
Yes.
Fun.
Yes.
What happens when stuff, and then it sort of spins off into the QAnon end of this, which is kind of fun as an observer from over here, but clearly not fun.
No.
To be in there.
It's not fun. Yeah, it's not fun. It's not fun.
There's the interesting kind of idea. It's a bit like what's it called, carcination. With it, which is nature's tendency for everything to evolve into a crab. The crab body, the crabification. The shape of the crab body form has evolved about 3 or 4 separate times, completely different lineages of arthropods. Crab's a good idea.
Yeah. Now, hold on. I want to go back to something very quickly. Are there a lot of giant rabbit stories that you've encountered? Have you come across a lot of giant rabbit stories?
He wants to go back to.
That's what I picked up from everything you just said, Ian, are there a lot of giant rabbits out there in the world?
There's not a huge amount, but there are some. I mean, there's a classic one from the 70s, which is, where is it? Fairfax County, Virginia.
Okay.
In 1970, right?
Okay. Sure.
So this is the original giant rabbit story that we've got. Where there's a couple sitting in a guy and his fiance basically making out in a car.
Perfect. Perfect. This is really 1970. Yeah.
Yeah. And I quote, "A man dressed in a white suit with long bunny ears ran out of the bushes and shouted, 'You're on private property and I have your tag number,' and threw a wooden-handled hatchet through the right front car window before vanishing again."
Fantastic.
A couple of weeks later, he reappears, and this time, this guy in a grubby white bunny suit, or grubby black and white bunny suit, is challenged by a security guard on a new property development where he is furiously hacking away at the roof supports of a newly built house with a long-handled axe. And he screams at the security guard, and "All you people trespass around here, you don't get out of here, I'm going to bust you on the head," and runs off into the woods.
And this is in Fairfax County, Virginia again. This is in Virginia.
Yeah. And this goes wild in the press, and more than 50 people in subsequent weeks claim to have seen the bunny man, including one who claims the bunny man ate his cat. And the police get nobody finds him, but the police get a phone call from somebody identifying himself as the Axe Man, complaining about trespassing. But it's since sort of, there's been developed an urban legend about a bunny suit clad escaped lunatic axe murderer, but it's clearly based on that story. And the esteemed singular Fortean Society out of Madison, Wisconsin have.
I've read their stuff.
Yeah, they're good guys. And they have. They collected several, definitely stranger giant bunny stories.
Guys in costume, guys in suits, or actual gigantic rabbits, or guys in suits?
These are actual gigantic rabbits.
Great.
Probably.
Okay. Now this is more like it. Okay.
Yeah. Somebody who is around 1999 or 2000, they were aged about 7, and they say, "I remember it's Easter morning. I was on the floor of my parents' living room watching some Easter special, playing with whatever new toy I got in my Easter basket and feasting upon chocolate goodies. I can clearly remember not hearing any sort of sound or something that would draw my attention. Yet I look out of the sliding glass door of the living room that went onto the fenced backyard. As I looked out of the sliding door, I saw a flash of colour. I distinctly remember white and blue and purple. I got up, looked out the window, and jumping over the fence into our backyard was a 6 to 7 foot tall rabbit man. It had the face of a rabbit with those cold, darting eyes and twitching nose, ears up and tall, white, cool purple colouring on the fur. It didn't release a basket or anything funny like that. It stood on 2 legs, which were flat like a rabbit's hind legs with large, powerful haunches. This thing it sort of looks back and then it jumps over the fence and looked at this neighbor's backyard.
Yeah.
And then there's another one dating from the 1960s when another child at Easter looks out into the backyard when they're aged about 8 or 9, and he's sort of examining the Easter baskets they've got, and sees a 6-foot-tall white bipedal rabbit wearing a black vest.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, that's all. I mean, that seems like childhood sort of fantasy in some ways, doesn't it? I mean, can't that be attributed to a kid thinking he's
that's got to be
he's
overactive imagination.
He's just jacked up. He's jacked up on chocolate. The kid has had too much chocolate, and he's just like losing his mind.
But,
like that.
They said that even after 60 years, it's vivid, and they're still quite frightened by it. And then there's a very strange one from a Canadian police officer who's when he was about 11 in 1988, says, I was looking out of my bedroom window across the backyard with the backdrop of forest. And he had a rabbit cage at the border of the forest adjacent to a work shed. And he witnessed a 6-foot-tall white rabbit with a dark vest facing the door of my pet rabbit's cage. And he went
interesting,
kind of getting skeptical. Yeah, it's the rabbit god breaking out his bed.
Interesting.
He says, I maintained a visual of the rabbit, and I slapped myself and pinched myself to wake myself up, and the pain confirmed I was not dreaming. He said he threw open the window that led to the backyard facing the rabbit cage and yelled at the rabbit, "Hey, I see you!" And he tried to jump out, just wearing his underwear, but couldn't make it out of the window. And the rabbit turned at him, looked at him, and took a series of bounds at high speed into the forest. But
also wearing a dark vest. Another one wearing a dark vest. That's weird.
Yeah. Yes,
that could have been in a commercial at the time for chocolate Easter chocolate or something.
Yeah, but that's really strange.
I understand that there's like some kind of Taylor Swift conspiracy or something you guys have been working on recently.
Oh, yes. Taylor Swift.
There must be a lot of Oh, yeah? Really?
She's caught up in the Fortean net?
Yes.
She must be.
She's been, I mean, she is allegedly Anton LaVey's
illegitimate daughter?
Granddaughter, allegedly.
Just daughter, right.
Is
really?
that right? That's what people are saying?
Because she does look, there's photographs where she looks remarkably like...
that's true, actually.
That's
Xena
why she
Shrek.
dominates.
She looks a little bit like Anton LaVey, actually, too, if you think about it.
And she's supposed to make the horn symbol a lot from the stage, whereas in fact she's making the sign language symbol for "I love you," which is the horn symbol with the thumb out.
Right.
But a conspiracy like this, what's the origin of it? Did you detect where it came from, or you're just floating around?
It's kind of floating around.
Okay.
It's wound up a lot of people. One of my friends, Andrew O'Neill, who is he's actually an occultist and Satanist, sent me a meme of that, the couple where the guy's looking at another girl and his girlfriend's looking shocked, which says the guy in the middle there's conspirasphere. The girlfriend has got musicians that are actually Satanists, and the one he's looking at says
Taylor
Swift.
Yeah, but the recent upsurge of it came from a guy who used to be a member of the boy band Boyzone and is now a born again Christian.
Big
Shane
Christian.
Lynch, and he says, she's doing You watch one of her shows, and she has 2 or 3 different demonic rituals to do with the pentagrams on the ground, and to do with all sorts of stuff on the stage. And there's also stuff about her doing fire ceremonies and things like that.
Wasn't there a theory that was it Barbara Bush was Aleister Crowley's daughter or granddaughter?
Yes.
Is that right?
That was great. Yeah, I wrote a piece about this.
That makes no sense.
No, it actually does, though. It's actually somewhat credible, though, isn't it? Didn't her? Well, just tell me. Aleister Crowley, the great, the great sort of figure of the occult and all these things. But yeah, supposedly she was his daughter, right?
I mean, the Aleister Crowley's kids were fascinating. There was one who died a couple of years back, in well down her 90s, and she was a sort of stalwart of the local Baptist church somewhere in the Midwest, and had a kind of, led a very upstanding
really
existence as a church leader and a great supporter of progressive causes and so on and so forth.
Amazing.
It just mentioned her parents were Aleister Crowley and which one of them? I can't remember which one of his partners it was now, but one of them. And it didn't stand on that; just mentioned that one line in her obituary. His son
was it that Barbara Bush's mother was who?
Yes,
somebody hung
the idea.
But she actually did hang out with Aleister Crowley, didn't she?
Maybe. Barbara's parents were socialites in the 1920s. And they went over to Paris and they hung out with people who are known to have hung out with Crowley. And the story goes that Crowley had an affair with Bush's mother, and Barbara emerged.
Right.
And there's pictures that are shown of her sort of in her later years next to Crowley, and they both look very similar. Actually, what happened was this is Fortean story in its own right, even if it is the actual story is completely untrue. A blogger made it up in 2005 and posted it on his blog with all sorts of quite lengthy story with alleged supporting information. And from there, people took it and ran with it and put it in books and websites, and it kind of got into the groundwater until eventually, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, somebody actually contacted him and asked him, "This story, is it really true? Where did you get it from?" No, it's not true. It's complete rubbish. I just made it up to see how far it would go. It's nearly 20 years since I put it up, and you're the first people to get in touch to fact check,
to ask,
to actually fact check it. Amazing.
Yeah. But there's all sorts of delicious stories about who Crowley is supposed to have fathered along the way. I mean, there's various people who claim to have been Crowley descendants, such as there was the writer Armando Crowley, who was a sort of insisted he was his son, and the evidence is slight. Then we come across Harry Smith, who was
the guy who collected all the music, the guy who was the musicologist guy.
Oh,
yes,
very eccentric, sort of folk musicologist guy who was very eccentric. He claims to have been descended from Aleister Crowley.
Yes, because he was a thoroughgoing occultist.
Really? I didn't know that.
Among other things, apparently he was a huge pain in the arse and spent years leeching off of Allen Ginsberg whilst living in the Chelsea Hotel. And he made and collected paper planes, and the Smithsonian Aerospace Museum has his collection of paper planes and stuff like that. He was a complete nutter cat.
What's the take now recently on the Havana Syndrome is something that I'm interested in.
Good question.
In terms of, because every report completely contradicts the previous report. So I'm completely at sea about what's actually going on, and it reminds me somewhat of how the UFO stuff is being handled. I just am at sea. I have no idea but the Havana Syndrome thing, I don't know what to believe and what not to believe and where it stands.
I am pretty sure it's a social panic. It's got the same sort of symptoms and the same sort of patterns as a lot of the sort of, like the Colombian Ouija board panic and the sort of paralyzed schoolgirls.
Of course, that
all those sort of things, those kind of things, and indeed the police panic that's going on in the States at the moment over fentanyl. This idea that you can get contact overdose from touching fentanyl and the police collapse and so on.
Oh my God. This is like such cutting edge shit. I haven't even heard of this.
No. I just saw a thing about this.
Really?
I saw that there's a thing. Yeah, I just saw a thing where a policeman collapsed while he was driving a car. He had a woman in the car with him. And the whole theory was that he had gotten a contact overdose from somebody else who was at the crime scene. And that's not, obviously, that's right. I just saw something about that.
Complete, because all the symptoms that the officers exhibit, they sort of keel over and they hyperventilate and sort of feel dizzy and so on. Fentanyl's basically an anesthetic, and if you overdose on fentanyl, your breathing becomes shallower and shallower until you die. You don't hyperventilate. And also, it was what sort of drug experts pointed out, if you could get an overdose from just touching fentanyl, fentanyl users wouldn't need to inject it, or smoke it, or whatever they do with it. They just have to stand near it.
But that kind of panic. The symptoms are of a panic attack. It sounds like a severe panic attack is what it sounds like. Yeah, I read about that. Yeah,
there's a guy called Robert Bartholomew who collaborated on a great book about school panics with our founder Bob Rickard, and he's basically the leading academic researcher into social panics, and he concluded that it is a social panic that results from prolonged stress from living in enclosed environments in hostile surroundings, and other things. However,
but there are some there's some there's the woman who had the perforated eardrum. I mean, she really needed serious surgery, that woman. Is there some other explanation? I suppose there could be some other explanation.
I mean, you can Munchausen's.
You can get perforated eardrums from sticking cotton buds in your ears.
All right, okay.
Things like
so
that.
Maybe she stuck a Q-tip too far in her ear.
And then assigning it to something else. But on the other hand, there's been a report out from some government investigation that says no, we find no physical traces. At the same time as there's been a 5-year investigation by I think CBS and other people who found credible evidence that there was a sort of a Russian special ops intelligence unit had people behaving very suspiciously in locations where people had reported having suffered Havana Syndrome. So, on one hand, the symptoms are not quite always social panicky. They're sometimes a lot more severe. So, on one hand, these sort of reports could be a cover-up. And it could be something real. You tend to find that when as soon as there's a government report that says it's bollocks, some other fairly official thing comes out and goes, no, really, it's happening. I suspect that there's something going on, inside the government's intelligence community. There's some sort of turf war pissing match or whatever between a couple of some sort of departments that are
it feels like that. It
using
feels
this
like
as and we just see the bit of the iceberg that sticks above the surface every so often.
Well, I'm basically, I keep an open mind on the Havana Syndrome, and it does seem like some of the evidence suggests that it could be sound weaponized in some way. But in both those cases, like the fentanyl police overdose case and the Havana Syndrome, you do see very timely fears. Like, we have a lot of social anxiety about Russia and the Chinese and espionage. We have a lot of worry about fentanyl. And even if it doesn't kill a cop by contact, it's like a few molecules will kill you. And if you have a kid, you're freaking out. My God, don't touch anything. And so it's funny that these things are layered.
Yes, a totally fake story that was circulated by a congresswoman somewhere about a 6-year-old dying of a contact fentanyl overdose, and one of the leading fentanyl experts was going, you don't find fentanyl just piled up around public parks. It doesn't happen.
That was like the Halloween story of a razor blade inside a Halloween candy. So then people were freaking out, and I think that was fake, but I don't know.
Well,
Yeah,
that whole
they're
sort of
pretty
like
much.
that line of urban legend and stuff like that
Yeah.
too. It's an interesting thing I was going to ask you about whether it still happens is the whole bogus social worker thing. Does that still happen?
Oh yes,
sort
yes,
of-
they periodically flare up.
Yeah.
Oh, what
I
is
just
that?
wonder if
And,
that's happening now when there's all the sorts of like fears about children being trafficked and stuff like that. Whether whether
Tell us
that's
what
a
it is,
thing
though.
that's back.
What's the
Yeah.
phenomenon?
Bogus social workers in which mysterious people, a bit like Men in Black, turn
Yeah,
up
that
on
sounds
people's
like the Men in Black
doorsteps.
thing, which is interesting too. Yeah.
Yeah, with claiming to be from social services and they want to take your child away. It tends to be
Wow.
something that happens in Britain. When people they're always a bit weird north, and people don't tend to give their children over, but also nobody can find these people either. I did
Right.
find there was a nice variation recently, which was a bogus water bailiff.
What's
What does that mean?
What's a water bailiff?
He's a guy who enforces the fishing rules on British rivers. You have to have a fisheries license to fish in British rivers, and they're enforced by guys called water bailiffs, which is quite an old, old.
Yeah.
One of those sort of faintly medieval British offices, and there was bogus water bailiffs somewhere in Suffolk, I think, who were going around and confiscating people's fish.
That's a great racket.
Somebody
Somebody catches them, you confiscate.
But again, it
Yeah.
feels like fairies. It feels like fairy folk coming and stealing your shit.
Absolutely.
And fairy
yeah.
folk
Yeah.
coming to steal your children too. Like
Yes,
they're going to
and-
steal your children. It's all the same sort
Yeah.
of thing.
And in fact, the first ever story I wrote as news editor when I started about 3 years ago now was a real bogus social worker story that took place in Germany, which was fairly involved kind of schmozzle, where in a custody battle, somebody paid some slightly strange right-wing sort of members of some bizarre micro-political party to pretend to be social workers and go round to this girl's grandmother and claim to and take her away, which they did, and they ran off with her, and they weren't the sharpest tools in the box and got caught.
Yeah.
And it involved
so
a
there's
sort
an
of
actual-
it involved a highly surreal French politician as well, who was sort of living in Thailand and pretending to be the Baron or something. And
God.
it's one of those sort of stories which just keeps giving, whenever it's just sort of, oh no, there's another level of craziness going on here.
Paul and I were talking about this before. Like, is the focus on these paranormal stories, is there something sort of modern about it that's a response to like the Max Weber idea that we're living in a disenchanted world, and therefore, without sort of dominant religion, we end up going towards the supernatural? Or do you see this? Because I don't think that's quite right, because you see this stuff in the medieval world and the Renaissance. When religion is in a magical world, you still see a focus on the bizarre and the weird. I was thinking about the Pied Piper story and how weird that is.
It all just bubbles up, whatever situation, again, going back to this bell curve thing, whatever, whatever society you're living in, there's things that are out on the far end.
At the edges.
And, they keep bubbling up and, sort of the little harlots are capering. Whatever, and you get
harlots are capering.
You get utterly weird stories in all sorts of environments that make no sense and have a sort of paranormal overlayer, and stuff will manifest strangely everywhere.
Yeah. And for me, it's always been, for me, Steve, I think that's true. It's always contact with something uncanny for me. It's always, there's something at the edge of it that's just, the uncanny thing is weirdly, deeply satisfying to me. And I'm usually way more inclined to never want to know an explanation, because I'd rather have the things be unexplained.
You don't want to know.
I don't
you
want to
like
know.
it.
Sometimes it's quite disappointing.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
no, that's
disappointing,
true, yeah.
and it's like I don't want. I have a high tolerance for things not being explained and for things being left open ended, and so it's always this feeling of
we're not obsessive believers and we're not obsessive skeptics.
Yeah.
We do revel in just the absolute sort of glorious surreality of things.
Yes.
And I'm constantly amazed by even the most sort of mundane and technological environments being able to cough up bouts of serious weirdness. I mean, there's just there was a ChatGPT freak out where it started speaking sinister gibberish for a few hours.
Right. Yeah. No.
It's just sort of
exactly.
some sort of occult intrusion into the mechanism.
Wow.
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
The Fortean gets its fingers in everywhere. And then there's that ongoing story, which I do like covering, about the drones.
What's that?
Where mainly US, but sometimes in other countries, military installations and so on are being buzzed by fleets of drones, also nuclear installations, power stations and so on. They're being buzzed by uncatchable, unidentifiable fleets of drones. They can't... They're very clearly there. They're very clearly drones, but nobody's successfully bringing them down. Nobody is successfully tracing their
origin,
their operators, and they operate at greater heights, greater speeds, and with much greater endurance than anything that we are aware that exists in the technology that we know of. They're kind of like UFOs, but they're definitely drones.
Well, this reminds me of Jetpack Guy. Was the guy at the airport? There was a mysterious guy several times, right? There was some guy with a jetpack, flying around. They could never find the guy. Wow. They could never, right?
That's awesome.
And it seemed to be a more maneuverable jetpack, although I guess jetpacks are getting more maneuverable now.
No.
He's like, no.
Jetpacks are bastards.
You're right.
Yeah, when I was running UK Maker Fair, which is a sort of great gathering of technological craziness. There's big ones in the States, which are really fun. And when I had my career in science museums, I was running the UK one as one of our events, and we had somebody with a jetpack at one of those. We were trying to get somebody with a jetpack, and I went to see it, and they are unwieldy and difficult. And, they set fire to your legs and they run out of fuel. And they're just terrible.
They do. Yeah, they are pretty terrible. And they go up for about 6 seconds and that's it. And it's like, they really
there's that whole
do much.
business with the aliens in the upper Amazon a few months back. It's about a year ago now, I think.
Missed that.
Villages in the upper Amazon being besieged by aliens who were attacking them. And dragging people off and, injuring people and so on and so forth. And there were supposed to be these flying green aliens that were... This is one of those explanations which, people come up with, which is just bollocks. Because, it's actually illegal miners trying to intimidate people off the land by pretending to be aliens.
Episode.
And they're buzzing around and leaping about using jetpacks. And you're going, no, they really aren't, because
they can't be doing that, right?
Yeah, you try using a jetpack in a forest.
This is
that's not going to happen.
Right. This is a satisfying thing. We talked to a gentleman, Avi Loeb, who is an astrophysicist at Harvard, who with the Oumuamua. And what was interesting in talking to him was that a lot of the explanations that were being put forth in opposition to him saying perhaps it's an alien artifact were actually just as bananas in scientific terms. That sort of comments that were
of explanations. Yeah. And that's one of the things I think the Forteans appreciate too, is that when you have these competing explanations, why are these ones dismissed out of hand? and it's because they rock the boat more. They're more against the paradigm or something.
It's always like the Carl Sagan story about this thing about extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Yeah,
right.
Which is rubbish. They don't require extraordinary. Well, first of all, what qualifies as extraordinary? There's already a majorly unscientific term there, which basically can be applied to extraordinary evidence. Is more evidence than you've got, even when you get more evidence. It's a dismissing term. And no, it doesn't require extraordinary. There's not more evidence-y evidence. There's evidence. You have to have sufficient evidence to demonstrate that something is real. You have to answer you have to tie up all the loose ends. You have to be able to, convincingly demonstrate that the thing that you are claiming causes it really does cause it. That's the same for every phenomenon.
That's
be it
no
gravity,
different, right? Yeah,
very interesting.
Aliens.
Yeah.
You just have to provide enough, evidence.
Yeah.
That covers all the loose ends and
Very
demonstrates
interesting.
that
That's
thing is really
interesting.
there.
That really is interesting.
You don't have
that's
to
really
have this
interesting.
extra magic evidence that scientists have dreamed up, because that is just scientific magical thinking, and exclusionism. It's not scientific.
Well, I think here I'm going to defend Carl Sagan, which is not exactly a heroic move, but
I like
think
Carl Sagan.
Yeah, I think that they're thinking not that it has to be magical evidence, but there just has to be a preponderance. The quantity has to be higher than
if you're going to say something. If you're going to
Yeah.
say something that is outside the realm of or ostensibly outside the realm, you just need at least a lot of it, more than
you need a
than
lot of
the
it.
normal
But you
amount.
also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You need enough. You need it may be you need more, but you need a sufficient
You need
amount
enough.
that it removes doubt, and that's what
Right.
that's the thing. And it's the same for whichever phenomenon you're dealing with, whether it's something that's well within the realms of science or something that's without. But using the term extraordinary, it gives exclusionists a get out by sort of not defining what it is. Absolutely, you need a really good bunch of solid evidence that's probably because if something is far weirder than the regular stuff, it probably does need a whole bunch more evidence than you might have.
Yeah.
But that's not extraordinary evidence. That's just sufficient evidence to prove that that's that's real.
I agree. But I think there's something too about this. I don't want to sound reductionistic, but I think that Ian and Paul, you guys have a certain kind of personality that feels comfortable in this space. That's not like believing and it's not doubting. And I think most people don't feel comfortable in that space. They want either to believe or they want to doubt, which is a kind of elitist arrogance, I think, because you lord it over everyone like, oh, everyone's a bumpkin but me. And you guys are more comfortable in this middle territory, I think, which is rare, I think.
There is a bunch of stuff, out there where you actually do have to say, we just don't have enough information to make sense of it. We don't know yet. What's the point of having science if either everything is, we know everything is true or it's untrue? And there is a bunch of, there's also a bunch of stuff that, as I say, is, it happens because a whole bunch of unlikely things coincide and something utterly baffling and peculiar happens once. And there's so many factors that have to be in place for this thing to have occurred. Actually, none of them are particularly odd in their own right, but when you combine them, they do something utterly strange. I mean, going back to technological weirdnesses, one of my favorite things in recent years has been the weird. I wrote about this a while back, sort of stock market Forteana. Because at one point, the stock market was a bunch of geezers in the ball pit wearing coloured waistcoats, waving their arms about, screaming at each other. And then it went to guys sitting behind a computer screen, picking up phones and screaming at each other. And now it's a bunch of algorithms doing something deeply opaque, hundreds of thousands of times a second, that require, weird technology that takes account of the speed of light. And they try and build the server farms as close to the stock market as they can to get the millisecond advantage of the speed of light down the wires. And one of the things that this did a couple of times over in recent years is things called flash crashes, in which some sort of arcane and completely not understood combination of the various algorithms doing the trading result in the price of stocks just free falling hundreds of points through the floor in an instant, and then bouncing back after having caused, investor brown trousers on 5 continents. They're just utterly weird, and there's nothing unusual about it. They're all the algorithms.
Right.
Have all been written by somebody. They've just been turned loose, and then they interact, and at some point they've interacted in such a way that they cause a completely anomalous freak out, and then bounce back.
The whole potential realm of kind of AI Forteana, of like weirdness that's going to develop through like artificial intelligence and things like that.
Yeah.
Is a whole other realm of it. I mean, it's like, what kind of weird shit's going to get generated there?
The chief executive of the people I work for when I'm not working for Fortean Times, who are a law tech company called Materium, have this whole thing about using the blockchain to iron out these kind of panics and things by combining law and digital things, which is really the way forward, I think. But the flash crashes are the kind of things that demonstrate the need for I won't go into the details of how the blockchain works, so I understand it completely.
But please, that stuff is so bonkers, and the crypto thing and the blockchain thing just seems like a whole other. It's confusing and it's weird, and there's weird shit that comes off of it. I mean, the whole cryptocurrency thing is so weird.
Shit comes off.
I mean, it's like there's so much weird shit.
That was kind of a technology looking for a use, in that it's kind of like NFTs are basically just the receipt. It's kind of like somebody sort of going, "Oh, we've got this technology. I know what we'll do. We'll have a transaction receipt, and you can draw a picture of a monkey on it." It's like you go to the shop and you give them the money, and you don't actually get anything. You just get the receipt out of the little card machine, and somebody draws a monkey on it. And,
right.
No, that's completely not what it's used for. It's used for buying and selling things. Actually, this is a technology that we can use to change world trade, and you're using it to just do the receipt. But the main problem I have with that is I get really confused as people start talking about crypto. I'm not sure whether they're talking about digital currency or Bigfoot.
Yeah, let's go. I prefer Bigfoot.
I prefer Bigfoot too.
Which frame of reference am I working in?
I prefer Bigfoot too. I much prefer Bigfoot. It makes a lot more sense, and it seems much more useful, and it seems much more friendly. The whole thing seems
Bigfoot makes more sense. That's hilarious.
Bigfoot makes a lot more sense to me. It does. Bigfoot makes a lot more sense. I can get my head around Bigfoot.
I had one more point. This thing that you just said here a little bit ago is really important, which is that sometimes shit just happens once. And this was something you were pointing out, and I think that's the nature of the anomaly that is hard for the scientific mind to appreciate or get on board with, because you think about natural laws, and then the phenomena happen according to natural laws, so they're going to be repeatable, and then you can study it. But sometimes all the conditions just converge one time to create something very strange. It's within the realm of nature, but you're never going to repeat it. And that's a kind of a key idea for me, key takeaway for me. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, you see that most obviously in the Strange Deaths column, which I write every issue. People die in extremely peculiar ways for that reason.
Well, I will tell you this: it's my first thing I read when I get the issue. Even though it's my favorite thing, I have to read it first. It's the Strange Deaths.
It was always the bit that I was reading first when I was not writing it. Whenever I get the magazine.
No,
over the back
there's
of
a woman.
strange death.
There's a woman in the March issue who dies from eating too many marshmallows, from trying to eat in an eating contest, eats too many marshmallows. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah,
But listen, Ian, this has been extraordinary.
Wonderful.
I think we're going to have you back for specific topics in future if you would agree to do that. And we would
Sure,
like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
really want to talk about spontaneous human combustion, but we definitely should come over there and see you guys over there, because
Yeah.
I've always wanted
That'd
to
be
come
great.
by
absolutely.
and meet
Yeah.
more of you guys. This has been amazing.
Thanks
Yeah.
for doing this.
Thank you.
It is. It's really fun, and I'm very happy to come back and play anytime.
Excellent.
Cool.
Very
Thanks a
good.
lot.
Very
Thanks,
good.
man. God, I literally feel high off my fucking ass, like just talking.
I actually I'm not into this as much as you are, but I also felt kind of overwhelmed by
Overwhelmed.
it.
You're
I
just
was
like,
yeah,
wow.
what? And then I just start getting my head around one thing, and he's hitting me with another. I'm like,
And until then, Steve, take us out.
wag on. Chinwag is a production of Treefort Media and Touchy Feely Films, hosted and executive produced by Paul Giamatti and Stephen Asma. Executive producers for Treefort are Kelly Garner and Lisa Ammerman. Dan Carey is executive producer for Touchy Feely. Our series producer is Rachel Whitley Bernstein, with additional producing by Mary Chulenza. Original theme music by Luke Top, with additional music by Via Mardot. Oscar Guido is our executive in charge of production. Tom Monahan is head of audio for Treefort. Our associate producer is Aidan Brooks. Audio production supervision by Jared Brom and Matt Dyson. Editing and mixing by Matt Dyson. Lastly, for more information, go to chinwagpod.fm and find us on Instagram or TikTok at chinwagpod or on Twitter at chinwag_pod.